35 minutes or so, and then we have microphones, and we'll invite you to join us in conversation. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our lunchtime guest, Dee Margo, the 54th mayor of El Paso. Mayor Margo was elected to lead the state's 6th and the nation's 20th largest city last summer. He previously served one term in the Texas House representing District 78. He also served as president of the El Paso Independent School District Board of Managers, as chair of the Greater El Paso Chamber of Commerce, and as one of Governor Abbott's appointees to the Oversight Committee of the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas. A 40-year resident of El Paso, the mayor has an undergraduate degree from Vanderbilt University. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Dee Margo. Give him a big hand.
Thank you.
Mayor, thanks for making time for us.
My pleasure.
Good to see you. So I want to know how the job is going so far. You've been in the job, by my math, for a little more than 7 months. You've been mayor of the city. Is it what you expected?
Yes and no. There are always challenges.
All right. How was it what you expected, and how was it not?
Well, you know, having served in the legislature, having dealt with the El Paso Independent School District in a situation that was less than positive, I had some comparable perspectives. And I will tell you, when I walked into the briefing by our city manager and his senior staff, you know, we're on a 9/1 fiscal year. So we have to immediately, and I was elected in May, actually sworn in June.
June 27th.
Which immediately means you start the budget process for the following fiscal year.
Right.
And I served on appropriations in the legislature. And I've said on numerous occasions, I thought that the information I was presented was as good or better than any by the city of El Paso and the staff under the city manager, Tommy Gonzalez, was as good or better than I ever received at the state.
Yep.
So I felt like we were on our way. The challenges were, we walked into what would amounted to already a predetermined tax increase because of contractual commitments for public safety, for police and fire.
Right.
So it was already kind of a preordained thing, which I was unaware of, and apparently had not been previously disclosed publicly.
Of course, everybody has a year one in office. Look, what has President Trump done for the last year but complained about the last guy who had the job? I mean, that happens.
Well, I'm not complaining about the last guy. I mean, it is what it is. The people of El Paso voted on these contracts.
Right.
So we're just trying to implement it, but we have to have the revenues to do that.
Yeah. Is the task of being mayor under the current economic, let me ask that question from another side. Is the task of being mayor at this moment in El Paso under the current economic circumstances more difficult than you anticipated?
Well, we are unique in that 70% of our tax base is residential. 30% is commercial.
Right.
We're atypical from any other large community in the state of Texas.
Right.
Normally, the communities I've spoken with in, say, Lubbock and Amarillo and the Panhandle, when I've been with their mayors, they're close to 50-50.
It's closer to parity.
It's close to 50-50. You get into the larger cities like Dallas and elsewhere, and it's flipped the other way.
Right.
So we're dealing with some challenges because of that mix, plus the burden of any tax base falls unduly on to the residents of El Paso. So we're acutely aware of the impact of that.
Right. And that's happening at a time when, although there's no statewide property tax, the folks who you used to serve alongside in Austin are trying to tell you and other mayors and other communities what you can and cannot do with regard to the property tax situation.
Correct.
And which would ultimately, while it might be pleasing as a political issue in a primary, ultimately would take money out of your pockets and the pockets of the city in terms of providing the kinds of services that you may need to provide to a city like El Paso.
The obligations that we have contractually with public safety.
But leaving aside the question of obligations, you understand that in a city of almost 700,000, with the county population it's about 800,000, you've got obligations that you need to provide on social and physical infrastructure that rely on that tax base.
Absolutely.
So as much as people don't enjoy paying property taxes, what they're doing is contributing to the ability of this community to pay for the services that the members of this community rely on.
Well, we have a fiduciary duty to fulfill basic functions.
Right.
Streets, roads, public safety.
Right.
Those are the things we have to do. We got to fill the potholes. We got to pave the streets.
So if the state tries to get you to handcuff yourselves as far as the amount of money you can generate from the tax base, have you told your old colleagues in Austin to step off as far as that goes?
Yes.
You have?
And I visited with the governor. We did that in a special session There were three mayors: the mayor of Amarillo, the mayor of Lubbock, and the mayor and I met with the governor to explain to him.
Right.
One size doesn't fit all.
Right.
We explained each of us what we have in the way of the demographics and the differences, plus the fact that I didn't couple this with is our central appraisal district only gave us a 1.4% increase in property valuations last year. We're the lowest in the state of Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, you go up to Dallas and Irving and that area, and they were up like 13 or 16%.
So property valuation ties to property taxes in the sense that if property values are higher, property tax revenue is higher.
Correct.
So you want taxes to go up.
I want valuations to go up. I want more investment, and I want greater amounts of.
Well,
sales
that's how
tax.
you say it. What I say is if you want valuations to go up, you want taxes to go up.
Well,
is that not true?
if we get more investment, if we attract more investment, more capital investment, or more users of our goods and services for sales tax revenues, then we benefit as a community. And the investments we're doing right now in our downtown area for refurbishment of hotels to attract
Right.
more conventions. We're building aquatic centers to attract regional swim meets and have parents come in. Right now, in El Paso, swimmers go to Andrews for diving meets because we haven't the facilities. We're
Right.
building that. We're attempting to do that. We've passed a number of bond elections. The schools have passed bond elections.
Yeah.
So we're trying to rebuild our infrastructure, attract
Right.
outside
Mr. May,
dollars.
the Andrews case is an interesting one. I mean, it's obviously a very specific example. It's a narrow example, but it gets to a larger point, which is El Paso, as I said, is the 6th largest city in the state of Texas, the 20th largest city in the country. If you go to Fort Worth, which is the 5th largest city, or you go to Austin, which is the 4th largest city, they have the diving facilities necessary that people don't need to leave town. In fact, probably there's a lot about El Paso that is not commensurate with the population size or, quite frankly, the importance of this city to the state. Do you think the city has not been, has not kept up with its population growth in terms of the services that it has provided? Is this city, which is such a large city, in a state full of big cities, somehow lesser than the other cities in terms of what it has available to its members of its community?
I will never say we're lesser. I will say we have more challenges than others at many times.
Why?
Because we're kind of an unknown jewel. That's the frustration when I served in the legislature, it was said 70% of the legislature had never been here. I'm in a congressman's office from Houston in Washington in October. One of his senior staffers, or one of his young staffers, middle 20s, late 20s, graduate of the University of Texas, from Houston, I said to him, "Have you ever been to El Paso?" "No."
Right.
We're not as well known as we need to be or should be given our resources, especially our human capital resources, which are the people we have here. We have the largest bilingual, binational workforce on the U.S.-Mexico border. We're the largest U.S. city on the Mexico border.
Right.
You gave our size. I was told we were number 19. You say 20, I'm going to go 19. We are the 6th largest, and we're a region of 2.7 million when you
Right.
take southern New Mexico, El Paso, and northern Mexico.
Right. Now, but of course, you're not the first mayor to enter office and discover that the city is not regarded with the respect that you and others believe it deserves. Why has the problem of El Paso not getting what it deserves from Austin or Washington persisted? Why is the problem of El Paso not being in the conversation it needs to be in? Why has that persisted? Why have other mayors not been able to solve that problem?
I'm not sure I can answer definitively why others. I think that's a real dilemma for us as a community, but all I can do is deal with what I can do going forward.
So how do you solve the problem?
Well, first of all, we're explaining to people who we are and the resources we have here. The average age of our workforce is 31.
Yep.
We have all that. That was one reason we went after Amazon. I mean, we have the attributes that an Amazon would want. Now, we knew we were a long shot, but we were positioning ourselves for the future.
Yep.
As I say, we're unknown. I mean, people know us from watching the Sun Bowl at Christmas time on TV,
Right.
but that's
They know Don Haskins, right? I mean, they know aspects of it.
They know UTEP.
Now they know
1966.
DJ Khaled, right? I mean, they know things about this community that are now known to the rest of the country. But the reality is, the El Paso you're talking about is largely unknown to most people.
I think so, yes.
Right. Do you, as a former member of the legislature, or although you're the nonpartisan mayor of El Paso, as an out Republican, does that give you a greater way to get into the conversation in Austin or Washington, or to get into a position to influence the discussion?
Well, I hope my past experiences, my involvement in the political arena,
Yeah.
and the relationships we built over the last many years would help educate people as to who we are and acquaint them.
Right.
I've told Senator Cornyn to use me in any way he wants as we deal with the dilemmas related to NAFTA and immigration.
Right.
That I'd be happy to go up and testify.
Well, given the fact that you're the mayor of a community that actually lives on the border, you might be in the conversation about immigration policy and the border wall. That seems interesting to me, right?
Well, I would hope so.
You'd like that. Have they taken you? Have you been taken
Not
up on
yet.
that?
I've been asked to give quotes and
Yeah.
comments, but not specifically to testify.
You're also a known quantity to the Republicans who run the Texas legislature. You're a known quantity to this governor. Do you have the ability to sway them on some of the issues that affect this community? Did you last session? Will you next session?
Well, let's debate semantics. I don't know that I can sway them, but I think I can inform them.
Right.
And hopefully we would persuade them to what's important for El Paso. I think I can get through the door.
Yeah.
And sit then. I was with the chief of staff for the governor a couple of weeks ago, explaining to him the issues that as he rolled out it was the day after he'd rolled out his tax plan for the next legislative session.
Right.
And I explained to them that, again, our tax base, what we walked into with our increases and where we are, and my concern over the fact that our Central Appraisal District, for whatever reason, which I dispute, our valuation's only going up 1.4%.
Right.
But a lot of that's driven by legislation, statutes in the state on how they do evaluations of property.
Yeah.
Plus our growth and everything. We're growing. Things are very positive on all the other stats.
So let's, for the benefit of the people in the room who may not be in the middle of this conversation as we are, let's talk about this property tax proposal that you alluded to. During the legislative session, there was a fight between the House and the Senate, both generally in agreement about the need to, quote, reform property taxes. But what that meant was giving voters a say beyond a certain percentage increase in the property taxes. If the local officials wanted to increase property taxes, they had to go to the voters. And there was a disagreement about what the percentage would be. The governor's campaign, not really the governor's office, but the governor's campaign came out a couple of weeks ago with a proposal that was well below what either the House or the Senate had proposed.
2.5%.
2.5%. He's suggesting that if local officials want to increase property tax revenue or property taxes beyond 2.5%, they have to go to the voters. You agree or disagree with that proposal?
I disagree completely.
What do you have against the will of the voters, Mr. Mayor?
I have nothing with the disagreement on the will of the voters. You'd have to parse that, which some of our politicos are good at doing. I don't mind voting for it. I mean,
You don't mind giving voters a say
I don't
as to
mind
whether
giving voters a
taxes
say.
go up.
I'm just saying, don't limit us from doing what we are elected to do and have a fiduciary responsibility to do when it comes to picking up your garbage and paving your streets and,
Right.
and providing police and fire.
Yeah.
So given where we are and our dynamics and the differences that we have with any other city, one size does not fit all. I told that I said
Right.
that to the governor in June of last year during the special session, and I'll say that again. We're not the same as another city of 800,000 in our county population in Texas.
Had you been in the legislature this session, let's say you had never lost to Joe Moody, let's build the time machine and go back. Mm-hmm. And so you're back in the legislature for your third or fourth term in the legislature. Would you have been a vote for the property tax reform proposal in the House this time?
Not the way it was done. I talked to Representative Darby and others about crafting something that would be accessible and appropriate for someone with, give us the flexibility.
More
I
flexibility.
think there could have been, my concern is Texas was founded on the basis of local control.
Yeah.
And here we are, we're succumbing to what goes on in Washington out of Austin,
Right.
from my perspective, in that they're overreaching and trying to make make decisions on things that ought to be made at a local level.
But you know, Mr. Mayor, that when you were in the legislature and the people you served with today view the local control conversation differently. I'm with you. Local control used to mean the locals controlled things. Now it's not local control, it's controlling the locals. Now the view of the state seems to be that people like you and the members of your city council and county judges are not trustworthy enough to be left to their own devices to make those decisions. The state is concerned that somehow you're going to get out of hand, and they want to tie your hands in the ability to decide on things like property tax increases.
Well, my perspective is the tail's wagging the dog here.
How's that?
going away having Austin make those type of decisions.
So you would have been opposed to all the impositions on local control that we saw in the last session?
I think
had
that,
you been in the legislature?
I think there are some areas that probably that need to be reined in. The big concern when I was in the legislature is we didn't know what all the debt structure was for all the school districts.
Yeah.
They didn't have it accumulated, so it's an impact on the state as a whole.
Right.
However, that's up to the local people to determine what's what.
Yeah.
So there was some big picture discussions, I would say, on the future and what is the impact of all this debt being issued in all these various areas that we don't really know that's out there. But in our case, my position was allow us. The difference with El Paso is because of our spread between residential and commercial, the voters of El Paso are acutely aware of whatever impact taxes have on them and any increases. Yes. And so if we as an elected official fulfilling our fiduciary duties can't properly articulate what we're going to do with their dollars, and if they think we're frivolous with them, then we're not going to be around.
Well, they have an opportunity to say
us.
that, and that is at election time.
That's true.
Right.
Plus, the large ticket items have been bond elections.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to implement right now.
Mr. Mayor, you know that not only in El Paso but around the state, the conversation around property taxes and the conversation around public education have been joined to be one conversation. Because the state used to be responsible for a much larger share of spending on public education, and a lot of that has now been offloaded to taxpayers. There was an effort to reform school finance in this legislature. It failed. The Supreme Court did not put a gun to the heads of the legislature and force them to fix it, and they did not fix it. If you were back in the legislature, what would you be telling, based on your knowledge of what El Paso needs in the way of school finance work? What would you be telling your colleagues about their responsibility on fixing school finance? What's your perspective on that?
Something's got to be done. Simply stated, something's got to be done.
Is it more money?
I'm not sure in every case it's always more money. I think there are things that the TEA can do to help our outcomes that had a chance to continue in my role as president of the EPISD Board of Managers. We had a 2-year limitation by statute for that. Now it's up to 4 years, but we had 2 years. I wanted 1 more year. I think there were some things we could have implemented that would have helped outcomes that I wanted to work with on a state level.
You have a unique perspective, having done that work on the Board of Managers. You understand the way that a lot of other people don't, in a specific way, the impact of spending on public education.
Absolutely.
Right.
And 46 cents of every tax dollar in El Paso goes to education.
Right.
Only 26 cents goes to the city.
Yeah.
23 cents goes to the county with the county hospital.
Yeah.
But the people, because the city collects the taxes, thinks that we are receiving them all, and that's not the case.
Right.
We're the lowest. The big ticket items across the state are education.
Right.
And then what is it? 85% of the state budget is education and Medicaid, healthcare.
Healthcare.
So it's like a 50-50 almost between the two. There is only about a 15 to 17% leeway on spending. So you're kind of locked in the way we are.
Are you sympathetic, Mayor Margo, to the Austin residents or the Houston residents in particular who complain because they're property wealthy districts that they have to send so much of their money to other parts of the state as the current school finance system is set up? Do you believe that system needs to be undone and reconstructed in some way to be fairer or more equitable?
I'm not sure what the answer is. I don't know what the panacea is for that. I do think something ought to be done. I understand why they would feel that way, but I also understand why we need what we need. I've explained that in our tax base and where we are.
Right.
And the uniqueness. And we have an obligation to educate the children in this community, in this region.
Right.
So it's a mandate.
Right.
So I don't know how you arrive at that, but time could have been better spent on education than on other issues they did this last session.
Can you be specific? What should they not have spent time on instead of education this session? Does it rhyme with bathroom bill? Yeah, okay. Mr. Mayor, this continues to be a subject of controversy in the legislature. There are those who believe that since that legislation did not pass, it ought to be brought back up next time. It ought to be revived for the next session. Can you give your perspective on that? Again, that would have been something that you would have been in the middle of had things gone differently and you still been in the legislature. What would you have done?
I was never in favor of it when asked. I so stipulated. My facetious answer was, where they've been going to the bathroom for the last 30 years. I mean,
Who's they in this case?
I don't anybody.
Yeah.
I don't understand why that was such an issue. Again, I mean, we were dealing with minutia driving the big picture. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Come on, let's figure it out on what we need in the big picture in the state.
Yeah.
You know, we still have that economic stabilization fund, which is the rainy day fund for people that understand. Should some of that have been used more for education? There's still the debate on whether it should have been used for Hurricane Harvey and some of the issues down there.
And it still may be.
And it still may be. We also are heading into a drought. I remember we had to fund some of the drought and brush fires when I was in the legislature.
Yeah.
That came after the fact for natural disasters. So, you know, there are things. We have creative people. The biggest blessing for Texas, as compared to the rest of the United States, is that the legislature only meets 140 days every 2 years. That's the biggest plus we have going for us as a nation.
There are some people who would like it to be 2 days every 140 years.
Yeah.
Right. We in the press wish they were there all the time, but that's just.
But to do a 2-year budget, it requires effort on behalf of the legislature.
Yeah.
And it requires thoughtful effort.
And it means limiting the distractions.
And it means limiting the
Right.
peripheral.
Right.
Now, why they got involved in some of these things, I'm not sure. But the bottom line was education is a priority.
Right.
According to our Constitution, it's that and public safety are the number one issues.
And that's what you should be spending time on.
spend
Well,
time.
if the lieutenant governor were sitting here, and of course it was he along with others in the Senate who made the bathroom bill a priority, he would say that public safety is in fact the reason that topic was discussed, that we have a concern about men endangering women in restrooms and showers and locker rooms. He insisted that there was a problem that needed to be solved, and that without that we were putting our wives and sisters and mothers and daughters at risk, that it was a public safety issue. Your friend Speaker Strauss disagreed. Are you Team Strauss or Team Patrick as far as that goes?
Team Strauss.
Team Strauss. You are temperamentally a little bit more in the Strauss camp probably than the Patrick camp, right? On these issues?
I would probably say that's correct. I'm for balanced pragmatism, and I'm pro-business.
Right.
I mean, we're looking to attract jobs and capital investment, and keep El Pasoans here. One of the biggest issues we talk about here over and over is our graduates from UTEP or community college or elsewhere leaving,
Right.
and trying to have them. We're doing a good job. Our Borderplex Alliance, we're bringing more jobs in. We're announcing more economic development opportunities than we've ever had.
Yep.
We're moving ahead. Our largest employer is Fort Bliss. It adds $6.5 billion to our economy on an annual basis. It'll never be overcome. We're the largest U.S.-based post in the United States. Our second largest employer is the El Paso Independent School District. Our third largest employer is the Isleta Independent School District. And our fourth largest employer is the city of El Paso. Our fifth employer are the tenant hospitals. That's the largest. We don't hit private sector until the fifth.
Right. First four are public
First
employees.
four are all public entities.
Right.
We have got to change that dynamic. And that's what I'm working for. And I will tell you that our council is also in concert with me on that. And our focus has been on jobs creation, what we can do, capital investment, and what do we need to do to improve our infrastructure here to attract that.
So the Speaker's argument, just to wrap the bathroom bill part of this up, he made an argument that was going to somehow negatively impact the economy. Business groups also said that it might impact the ability of the state to attract jobs, to attract business. What about the idea of economic incentives as a way to attract jobs and business? If you're an economic development guy, that puts you squarely in a conversation that has changed over the last 20 years. 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, you had elected officials very proudly saying we need to be in the business of offering deals to businesses to attract them here because the return on our investment is going to be multipliers ahead. What did Rick Perry do the last 5 years as the Republican governor of Texas, but travel around the country effectively as the chief economic development officer of Texas, making deals with businesses? Economic incentives, Mr. Mayor, have fallen out of favor. We seem to think that not offering companies deals to come here is a feature and not a bug. That's a positive. We think that makes us look good. What do you think about that?
Well, it depends on the environment and where you're talking about. I mean, what location are you talking about? What do they have in the way of infrastructure? What do they have in the way of parity with industry, with other things that you can work from, et cetera? We draw a lot because of Mexico and the maquilas and the manufacturing there. 1 in 4 jobs, in Mexico equates to 1 job here. Okay, so we're tied there from the manufacturing. It's one of the largest manufacturing sectors in the world. I think it's over 200,000 employees when you calculate the 50,000 we have plus the rest in Juarez. So we have a manufacturing hub. We're one of the largest. People still don't know that as a whole across the United States. But we have been providing incentives to improve our infrastructure in our downtowns to attract sales tax, hotel taxes, conventions, and those things. We're refurbishing our downtown. There's over $300 million in investment down there.
Right.
But the bulk of our investment is not coming from El Paso. It's coming from a program on state sales tax rebates that expires in 2019. That, frankly, I'd like to see us be able to extend that or bracket it for communities like ours, which are not on parity with other communities.
But the kind of investments you're talking about are a little bit different from what I'm talking about. You mentioned that you had put in potentially to get an Amazon, to get the Amazon deal. I mean, around the country, cities are very proudly offering Amazon all kinds of bells and whistles to get that second headquarters, which would be some untold number of jobs, and it would have a massive economic impact. Now, Austin and Dallas are the 2 cities that are last among the Texas cities that put in for this as finalists. But again, the state is very resistant to offer the kinds of incentives that it once upon a time did, thinking that they would get that money back in spades.
Well, they used to, don't confuse deal closing funds with economic incentives with a return. Now, our economic incentives, according to our studies by our Economic Development Division of our city, show that for every dollar we have invested in an economic incentive has come back to us in the form of $4.95.
Anybody would take that. They've got the data. You'd take that deal.
I'm fine with that.
Right.
Now, you look at Wisconsin and what they offered Foxconn. I don't know that they'll ever get that back.
Right.
So,
but you understand that the state, even in possession of that data, or data of the kind you're talking about, is still saying that giving money to corporations for the purpose of attracting them to Texas is corporate welfare. That's the phrase.
Texas has not done what other states have done because we have other assets that drive people here based on our taxes.
Low taxes, tort reform, predictable regulation is the old Rick Perry rap. Right.
And the human capital.
Right. And human capital. So the bathroom bill was said to be a factor in the conversation around Amazon. We'll see if it ultimately is or is not. Sanctuary cities was another thing that came up as a potential turn off to businesses locating here. And of course, it affects the entire state, the way that this discussion of this issue went and the legislation, which is now in litigation.
Right.
And El Paso is part of that litigation. It is seen also as a potential turn off to people who want to come to Texas. You and I had a conversation when you first got elected about whether you thought El Paso might join the lawsuit. It was not entirely clear that you viewed the city as properly part of that conversation, but it came up that El Paso joined the lawsuit, and the lawsuit now includes El Paso and a bunch of the other big cities and counties. Would you have voted for this legislation if you were still State Representative Dee Margo?
No, not at all.
You wouldn't have voted for it in the end? Would you have voted for the light version, the pre-Schaefer Amendment version that left show us your papers at arrest as opposed to detainment?
The pre-Schaefer...
Because you would have been the only Republican not to vote for it.
Charlie Guerin crafted that, and then Schaefer changed it, so it went down the tubes.
But you would have not. You're saying that if you had been in the legislature, you would have not have voted for it.
I would say that if it would have precluded the Senate from being able to pass theirs, which was far more onerous, then I probably would have tried to help do that.
Right.
But my position from day one is El Paso is not a sanctuary city.
Right.
We cooperate. We've never had any issues. There's not problems. We shouldn't be part of that discussion. That was done because of heartburn with the sheriff in Austin.
Travis County.
Right. Okay? So we got the tail wagging the dog. You got one entity that irritated our governor, and that forced that whole issue. I think the people in East Texas don't understand immigration or the demographics that we have here. When I served it was interesting, when I served And I was the only Republican from a border community in our Republican caucus. We still had some of those outliers who just didn't understand immigration. They didn't understand the mix. They didn't understand what was going on. But at least in our caucus, they would ask me questions. And I used to start out with, well, Dee, you're a conservative Republican. Tell me what's going on here. And I'd start out by saying, well, let me give you my background. My great-great-grandmother came from Mexico. My great-grandmother came from Mexico. And my grandfather didn't speak English till he was 18. They're all from Rio Grande City, Texas. And I've been in El Paso almost 40 years. We're 80% Hispanic. We're the largest city on the U.S.-Mexico border. Now I'll tell you what you want to know. Okay? So they didn't understand that.
Yeah.
But they would listen to me, whereas, unfortunately, the majority of the border are Democrats, and they wouldn't listen to them. So at least I had a voice, and I thought I tempered some of their rhetoric a little bit, opened their eyes maybe a little bit as to what's out here.
Why did you sue? What do you believe is wrong with this legislation? Why did El Paso join the suit?
Because it was free.
Because it was free to join it?
I said I wasn't going to join if I didn't want to spend, I did not want us to spend legal fees.
So you opposed it?
MALDEF, I always opposed it, but MALDEF agreed to take us on without any cost to the city. And when that occurred, I said, fine.
So let me be clear on why you oppose it. You oppose it because you think it's racist, which is what many of the other cities have said is the basis for their opposition.
I think it's unnecessary and overreaching.
Do you think it's racist?
I could be construed that way. I think the rhetoric came around it, portrayed it as that, yeah.
Do you believe that the fear of racial profiling that many have raised, if you have this legislation in effect, is a legitimate concern for your friends and neighbors in El Paso?
I don't look at that. The racial profiling occurred with the Schaefer Amendment. I don't think before that it was due to cooperation.
Yeah, but I'm talking about if the bill has passed, which includes the Schaefer
Amendment. Which we're fighting.
Yeah.
That could be misconstrued. And by that, we were under a DOJ agreement from a Carl Starr litigation years ago with the county on the sheriff's department, where a sheriff went on a bus out in the ETJ, the extra territorial jurisdiction area of El Paso, went on a bus and started asking people for their identification.
Yeah.
And there was a settlement, and we're subject to that.
Right.
So one of my arguments was, hey, we can't become involved in this.
Mayor, you said we said that public safety was a driver for some of those who pushed this legislation. They believed that there was a need for this legislation because of a public safety problem. What we hear after the fact is, because of this legislation, there may be an unintended additional public safety concern, and that is that people are no longer going to be willing to report crimes. People are going to believe that the environment that they're in does not allow them to talk to the police or to be out reporting sexual assaults or reporting robberies, and that ultimately our communities are going to be less safe as a result of this legislation. Are you sympathetic to that point of view?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime you have that type of rhetoric and that perception by people, yes, it's a concern.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
As I say,
did you convey this at all during the session to your friends in the legislature?
Oh, yes, I did.
Yeah. And what did you hear back? Reveal private conversations. Come on. What did you hear back?
It was the entire environment down there of the tail wagging the dog. I reiterate that for the third or fourth time.
Yeah.
You know, you have these issues that really aren't driving substantive policy.
Yep.
They're political.
Right.
They're peripheral.
Right.
And they needed more adults in the room.
Right. You described yourself a moment ago in passing as a conservative Republican. Do you still consider yourself to be a conservative Republican?
I consider myself a fiscal conservative and probably a little bit more liberal on the social policy, for sure, than others would say, given the parameters that are typically out there.
Right. You're a lifelong Republican?
Pretty much.
Do you recognize the Republican Party in Austin right now as your Republican Party?
It's totally different. It's concerning.
Yeah.
But that's at a national level too, on both sides.
What happened?
On both sides.
But I'm asking you about the Republicans. What happened to the Republican Party that you see in Austin that makes you say it's changed?
I'm not a political historian. I'm an observer and I'm a participant. I don't really know why we started getting so many single issue out there, single issues out there driving policy,
Yeah.
as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah.
It's been flipped. The pendulum's gone too far the other way,
Right.
and I'm not sure where it's going to stop.
Yeah.
I don't really like either side. I mean, I remember hearing John Breaux when he was a senator from
Conservative Democrat from Louisiana.
Louisiana, talking about how you don't govern from the periphery, you govern from either end, you govern from the middle.
Right.
And we're not governing.
And especially being a mayor, local officials especially, and you ran as a nonpartisan office holder.
Right.
Your council members are nonpartisan.
True.
There's discussion of whether those offices should become partisan offices. You think they should or should not?
Should not.
Should not.
By far should not.
Because why?
Well, because we're representing the people locally. We're not representing parties. The parties aren't going to dictate what we do here in El Paso.
Right.
It's a local issue, local control, et cetera.
Right.
Plus the fact that a lot of this is going to be, I don't know what the dynamic is going to be, but in 2020, for the benefit of the audience, if they don't recall, we're doing away with straight ticket voting in the state of Texas. So you're going to have to think about who you vote for.
You think it's a good? You think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't think the parties ought to dictate who you vote for, period.
Right.
I mean, I don't know one party. I never voted straight ticket in my entire life. Regardless, I voted on both sides of the aisle for people I thought were appropriate.
Yep.
And would fulfill the obligations from a character
So
standpoint.
a couple more questions before we go to the audience. You talked about the national level and issues at the national level and maybe not recognizing party labels at the national level. How do you feel about President Trump more than a year in?
I wish he'd stop Twitter.
But so let's assume he stopped Twitter, but his policies were the exact same policies. Would you be good with that?
Well, if you talk about his policies and the rhetoric he has surrounding them, no. The idea that he wants to deal with Dreamers, yay. The idea that
So
he
you're,
did tax
you're,
reform.
you're for a deal on DACA.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
The fact that he did the tax reform we've done, absolutely. Those kind of things. But quit attacking both sides.
Right.
I mean,
What about the border wall, Mr. Mayor?
I'm not in favor of a border wall. We have a fence here. I think we ought to control our borders, but I don't think a wall spending multiple billions of dollars. I mean, it's again, to me, it's hyperbole and rhetoric at the upside. It's kind of like every time I hear wall, I think of the Berlin Wall. I mean, it's just the opposite of what you want to convey. We want to protect our borders, fine. I'd like to see more customs and immigration customs enforcement on our bridges so they stay open so we can go back and forth a whole lot faster.
What about family migration? I'm not going to use the phrase that's been used by some others. I'm just going to call it family migration. What about family migration, which the president wants to end as part of his policy?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there's got to be if you look at our history, look through what came through Ellis Island, look at the Irish, look at the Eastern Europeans, look at everybody. We were the kind of the Ellis Island of Latin America coming up through here. And we have that's our El Paso is a melting pot of everybody.
Yeah.
This is a great community with great people, and we all get along.
So, Mr. Mayor, I hear you talk about being concerned about President Trump. You're against the bathroom bill. You're not happy with sanctuary cities. You're for fixing school finance. If you were in the legislature, Governor Abbott would be running ads against you right now.
Possibly.
Right.
Possibly.
I mean, the political environment in this state has surely changed from the time that you served low those many years ago, which is to say 2011.
I'm against, Evan, I'm against triangulation, whether it be with the media or with other people. Yeah. And by that I mean, if I have an issue with a governor or a senator, I'm going to talk to that person. If I have an issue with one of my council members, I'm going to talk to them. I'm not going to go talk to their staff to get to them or a third party to go to them. And what we have out here in this political arena is we have people going to the media in lieu of talking to the governor or the lieutenant governor or others. I'd rather have my direct conversation.
By the way, that happens on the other side also. You have
absolutely.
The governor and lieutenant governor going to the media also.
I understand it, but my point is that conversations ought to be honorable between people,
right?
So that you can have genuine discussion.
And on substance.
Right.
Last question before we go to the audience. You've got a bunch of state House members from El Paso. They happen to all be Democrats.
True.
Up for re-election this time. Will you endorse your Democratic incumbents who represent the interests of the community you serve as a nonpartisan mayor? as they seek election this fall?
Well, right now, I'm not endorsing anybody in any election, but I am supportive of our delegation and what they need to accomplish on our behalf.
Even if
and
they're
frankly,
Democrats?
Yeah, and I have given to Democrats. I mean, it's just, I feel like as mayor, I need to kind of stay out of it, but I've supported a lot of them.
You're going to stay out of the congressional primary to succeed Beto O'Rourke? Will you not pick a
No, I'm
favorite
gonna
in
stay.
that primary?
I know all the players, and
Right.
I just feel, I think personally, I need to just kind of stay on the sideline.
Now, in those cases, it's El Paso versus El Paso.
Right.
In any of those races. What about the United States Senate race? There are some who suggested to me that maybe you ought to be pressed into supporting one or the other candidate for the United States Senate if it comes to it in the fall. If it's Congressman O'Rourke from El Paso and Senator Cruz, you have a point of view about that race?
My concern, I think Congressman O'Rourke would do a great job.
He'd be the first person elected statewide from El Paso in the history of the state, correct?
But my concern is the limiting power of the party when you get to Washington, who directs how you vote or where the money goes or things like that. I'm concerned on both sides, whether it be the Republican or Democrat. I'm concerned about how effective our legislators can truly be given the structure of the process in Washington.
Right, but regardless of who wins that Senate race, they're going to be hamstrung by the process you're talking about.
Right.
So given the fact that they're both going to be hamstrung, do you like one better than the other?
Why are you asking those questions, Evan? I have supported, let me just answer it this way. In the past, for Congress, I have supported Beto O'Rourke financially. Okay? Okay? I have problems with the rhetoric coming out of Senator Cruz on numerous occasions. I want people effective for and recognizing El Paso. And sometimes the rhetoric of their comments works to the detriment of this community. And I got a real heartburn issue with that.
Okay, that's actually an answer. That's good. All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. We're going to go to questions from the audience. We'll take as many as we can. Please don't make a speech, ask a question. And please be respectful, and we'll be respectful back. Agnes has a microphone. And there's a microphone over there as well. We'll take this question first. Yes, ma'am. One second.
Okay. I stand to support Dee Margo and his lovely wife, Adair. They have both been forthright and honest with me all my time of knowing them.
Okay.
I
Yep.
met them at UTEP at the Durham Center.
You have a question,
My
Dr.?
question is,
Yes.
Mayor Margo, my final degree is in rhetoric. How do you define rhetoric? You've used it negatively each time you've used it. Carrie Moe is here, who is pursuing a doctorate in rhetoric,
What do you
which
think?
I have.
What do you mean by rhetoric?
What do you mean by rhetoric?
Let's ask you to
Define
explain.
it.
Their conversations, their perspectives, the comments they make. But you know, cut me some slack. I played football in college. You know, and I've been accused of not playing with a helmet on numerous occasions. So well,
Rhetoric is not all negative.
it's not.
Rhetoric was defined by Plato.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All
I'll defer to you, Doctor.
of persuasion.
I'll
All right,
defer.
Dr. Moy.
Now we add in the modern sense.
All right.
Okay.
Dr. Moy, we're going to go to a next question. Thank you very much. I didn't think that we'd fight about the definition of the word rhetoric.
We have
of
a
all
question
the
over
things
here.
I thought we'd fight about. Next question. Sir.
The city of El Paso is $4.27 billion in debt, and it's rising. Each citizen owes $19,000 plus. The city government continues to give multi-million-dollar incentives, abatements, a stadium and arena to billionaire developers who can well afford their projects on their own. To me, it smells of corporate welfare and totally unnecessary handouts of taxpayer money. Can you address my question, Mr. Mayor?
Do you agree with the premise of the question first?
No.
The city is handing out basically gifts and bonbons.
I tried to explain what our economic development returns have been through the course. This particular stadium that he's referring to, we just announced yesterday, the return to the city is projected to go from $1 million to $18 million in positive
How much will
return.
you be investing on the front end?
What's
on
that?
this? What will the cost of the city on the
Well,
front
it's already
end
been
be?
done. It was done before me. I don't have all the numbers. It was done several years ago.
But you're saying that the economic benefit to
we
the
just
city.
did the budget numbers based on the return for the debt structure of what we put in there.
Right.
Will show at the end of the term, instead of $1 million, we've accelerated it to an $18 million.
So the debt that the gentleman refers to, and I believe you alluded to earlier, that was a decision made prior to your time
That's right.
as mayor. You have a problem as mayor with taking on debt if that debt ultimately produces a benefit?
Not if it makes rational sense and it's not a burden to the taxpayer.
Would this deal have been a deal you would have done had you been the one in the driver's seat?
Oh, I was very much supportive of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's been a great economic driver for our downtown, and other things are cascading off of it. I mean,
Yep.
it's very positive. And as I said earlier, understand people, the majority of the incentives that we're providing are state sales tax rebates. They are not local. It's not our local dollars. That's a portion, but the majority is from the state on a program they allow us to do that expires in 2019.
Okay. Next question. Ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Smith, thank you. El Paso is a very unique city in the United States. Part of what gives its uniqueness is its physical isolation from other large cities.
Yes.
I've come to really appreciate that uniqueness, except when it comes to air travel. We have a big issue. I mean, if you compare El Paso to Albuquerque, the number of airlines that fly out of Albuquerque compared to El Paso, and it's ironic that Southwest Airlines is one of the sponsors of this event. But I wonder, what are you doing, and what is the city trying to do to lure more airlines? I mean, Mr. Smith, you might have been able to take a nonstop flight from Austin, but maybe not.
Yeah, but I complained about it the whole way because the point you're making, and Mr. Mayor, we actually talked about this before we came up here today. The fact is that El Paso, it is easier to get to Portland, Oregon from a lot of the cities in Texas than it is to get to El Paso right now. And I wonder if El Paso is held back from an economic development standpoint by the lack of easy access to and from this city in a way that enables commerce and enables tourism, or if El Paso is simply going to be relegated to be second tier as far as the airlines go.
We recognize that it is an inhibitor for us, and our economic development departments have been working on it. We just added 9 new flights in the last 3 years. We just did the press release, I think yesterday or the day before, about the new flights to Chicago and to Denver that are coming online. We are working as diligently as we can. One of the big pluses, we got rid of regional jets from here to Chicago, and now we're going to have direct flights in 737s.
Yep.
But those, yes, that's an issue, and we're doing our darndest to both our cargo and our passenger traffic went up last year.
Yeah.
We're showing increases. Went up 4%.
But again, it's the kind of thing where I'll go with your number, the 19th largest city. I still think it's 20th. Maybe you're right. Go with the 19th largest city. Is it right for the 19th largest city to be as cut off effectively as it is in the eyes of some in terms of access in and out of the city?
Well, if I could wave my magic wand, no, we would have more direct flights to Austin, which I do frequently, and yes, I have a hard time going back and forth, and sometimes it takes 4 and 5 hours, which it makes me wonder if I should drive. But the reality is what it is, and we're working hard to establish that.
Yeah.
We've identified the communities, the cities that we need more direct flights to, that will help us from trade and commerce standpoint.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's on your radar screen.
It is on our radar screen. We're busting it to get it done. It's just not something you can get done overnight.
Right. Ma'am.
You had mentioned being on the EPISD school board. If you were on the school board now, what would you do to improve the overall situation?
You did talk about some things that you saw in your time there that were things that TEA could do or that could be done of a non-financial nature.
Well, I always thought that there ought to be something besides a step pay for teachers. That means based on longevity. And I tried to get some form of to determine some process for merit-based pay. And I went to the union representatives and other teachers to say, come up with something. You come up with something, and we'll do our
Propose
darndest.
something back.
Yeah, give me something to deal with. We'll work on it.
Right.
I said, don't tell me a history teacher in high school at this high school that you have two history teachers, one who busts it and the next one who occupies space, which happens in any employment. Don't take this as attacking teachers, whatever. It happens across the board. You got players and you got marginal, okay? So why shouldn't that player that I refer to, who busts it, who meets those kids before school, meets them afterwards, tutors them wherever they can to get them, why shouldn't that person, as opposed to the person who's only there during school hours and never after hours, never does anything extracurricular, get more if they're both there for 10 years? And we'd get mixed arguments about that, and they would never come back to me with anything to do. I also wanted to unencumber the principals. To me, I think the critical component for the school systems are the principals, because they pick the teachers that occupy their school, and they set the culture for that. Every school, the teachers, you've got site-based management, okay? So my dilemma was, you have principals required to do all this state and federal paperwork all on going on, and I thought they ought to be out there going from classroom to classroom on a daily basis, MBWA, management by walking around, seeing what's going on, seeing who the good teachers are and who the ones that need help are, who need to be coached up. Not who's bad, this condemnation that we get out there. They're good teachers, but some of them need to be elevated a little bit more. So train those principals on how to identify talent and coach talent.
So what's keeping the schools from doing that now?
I'm not there to determine it. Mostly it's the evaluations on the TEA say, we will do a minimum of one 45-minute classroom evaluation, either per semester or per year, recommended 3, but you can get by with 1. I submit there is no way on God's green earth you can evaluate a teacher with
Once a year.
one, whether it be one semester or whatever. I wanted to change the process of the evaluations. They were starting a new TEA form.
Yep.
At the time I was talking to Michael Williams about it, I sat on the 60 by 30 board with higher education that Woody Hunt from here chaired. I sat on that. The problem I had at the 60 by 30 was they never incorporated the TEA in it. I mean, how do you get to 60% of your 24 to 35 cohort by the year 2030 with some form of an advanced degree, technical, certificate, or whatever,
right,
if you haven't incorporated some kind of closeness with the secondary ed? And
Well, the fact is, public ed and higher ed, in the eyes of many people, are really one bucket.
and
It's
it
like
should
pre-K
be.
through 16.
But we were
It's
doing
not
this, and
two
I
different-
understand the outcomes we're talking about 60 by 30. Dr. Natalicio, Dr. Serrata, we're all in agreement with
But not
it. I'm in
focus on-
agreement.
but not focus on
I
public
just
ed.
thought that there should be a higher level. Dual credit's a big issue. The economic viability of our community is going to be solely predicated on the education of its workforce. Period. The future of El Paso is the future of our educated children.
Is there anything the mayor can do to advance that? What can the mayor or the mayor's office do?
Well,
if we take that as a foundational principle for
all right,
this city, what can you do?
Here's some of the things we're doing. We did Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi at all our libraries, right? We did public Wi-Fi there. We're looking at it at the parks, where those kids can have a place to do it. I know that the EPISD school district, I think, gave everybody a computer, gave everybody, or they're attempting to do. We're doing some joint things related to parks and athletic fields and things like that. My position is whatever we can do to support and help our education system at the secondary level or at the higher ed level, this community needs to do,
yeah,
and our city needs to do. So we're doing the things we can. Tommy Gonzalez, our city manager, and his senior staff are very creative. They're bringing out things that we can do, and I got to tell you, our city council is very much in favor of that.
Yeah. Okay. Question over there, Agnes.
Nope.
Or gentleman right there. Yes, sir.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Brian Mena, and I'm a reporter with the Untitled Tribune, EPCC school newspaper. So this question is regarding the renovation of certain areas to accommodate the middle-class taste, otherwise known as gentrification. You and Evan both discussed the importance of refurbishing and improving El Paso. So do you see gentrification as an issue the city faces, and if so, how would you address it?
Is gentrification a concern for you in terms of the composition of the population of the city, where people live, affordable housing, and all that?
As I understand gentrification, I would love it to be a concern for us, because it means we're building up neighborhoods, we're making investments. We got a mixed population throughout. This is what one of the benefits of this community is. We're at all levels and all socioeconomic levels, all mixes of cultures, et cetera.
Yeah.
And we live throughout the city. Now, the housing authority is doing more mixed market and affordable housing in different areas. We're building up the downtown. We're having more residents. We're trying to drive more residents downtown. I would love to have people complaining because there's too much gentrification on that, but we're not there.
Right.
We're not there. I think we're on the cusp of trying to, take what we have and build it up and take advantage of it.
I'm told that's the end? Okay. We've hit 1 o'clock. We're very fortunate to have had so much of the mayor's time. Thank you for being here, Mr. Mayor. Thank you all for coming. Please give the mayor a big hand. Good. Mayor, thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. Good to be